This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, I will call the continuation of the July 14th Pelican Preserve Advisory Committee meeting to order. We have with us here Randy Bottleson, Mark Eversman, Alan Steinbeck, Doug Zanter, and myself, Phil Measy, John Grega, and Carol Panko are on line. John, are you hearing us? We've heard from, oh yeah.
Yes, I'm hearing you fine, as long as you speak into the microphone.
Yeah, okay. I would ask that we have a vote to fully include John and Carol in the meeting due to circumstances. Can I have a motion to do that?
I motion that we allow both John and Carol to be able to vote in this meeting.
Yep. Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
It passes 5-0. Okay, John and Carol are included. It's my intent this morning, we started at the beginning of this meeting on the 14th, that we were discussing the relationship of the PPAC and the PPCA as far as landscaping is concerned. And it's something that I think that we want to, we need to have that, a continuation of that discussion, but I think we're not ready to do that today. I would like to put that off until our August 11th meeting, the next regular meeting, because we agreed that we need to get more information from Tony and what the staff may be doing in order to decide exactly how that relationship is going to work and whether we are going to adopt the memorandum of understanding if that needs to be done. So I'm saying that we are going to put that off, and as you see, that has been removed from the updated agenda that Georgia has presented here. I'd like to start off also with we're going to revise the agenda. We have a new issue that come up that Chelsea O'Reilly is going to describe to us, having to do with bonds that were just, this issue was just discovered yesterday. So I think we ought to put Chelsea on first because it is will result in another expense, not this year necessarily, not this year, but expense going forward for Pelican Preserve, and we need to understand what it's about. So Chelsea will be here to describe that to us. I hope.
This is Rhonda Mossing from MBS Capital Markets. Is Chelsea not on the meeting?
Chelsea will be here in a minute. They're calling her, and she'll be here in a minute, Rhonda.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
While we're waiting, I just want to let you know that I will not be at the August 11th meeting. We will be out of the country, and I won't be able to participate even via Zoom.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Just so you and all the committee know.
I'm sorry. What was that? All the committee.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have copies of those?
That's, I'm trying to email it and get it to them.
Maybe while we're doing that, I think there's one item that we could take up. Let's go to the financial report. And Alan has presented us with a new financial proposed financial report presentation. And I would be interested, and I guess people will ask the emails to people too, I guess.
She handed it out.
Oh, okay, but I'm thinking of John and Carol.
Oh,
Is that
I
on
think you said
here?
she put it on.
You put it on?
No. I don't. It's not Laura.
Could we, Georgia, could we put
Which
the
one?
financial report up? Okay, but it's the financial report. The issue in the financial report is just, do we like, are we satisfied with the formatting of the financial report as Alan has proposed it?
Oh, is that it?
It's not the amounts. We're not going to be discussing the amounts.
We're talking about this one page.
We're talking about this one page.
Okay.
That's what they want to pull it up though.
Do you want any comments now, or you want to wait for comments?
Let's wait for Carol and,
Sorry. That one.
yeah,
Okay, I have it.
you got it?
This one.
Yeah, okay. Can you, Carol and John, are you getting that now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. As I say, the issue here is not the numbers, but the format. And so I would ask for your comments on Alan's proposal here as to how to present the numbers at each of the meetings. In the past, we have not had a regular process, and I think that this will give us a regular process for our financials. Doug, do you have?
Yeah, I did just one thing I did. I like the simplified format. I think it's a good one page. I know when I get mine at the Ponds Group, there's another column, purchase not build, that I look at. So it might, and it comes out of the standard report that Laura gives me. And purchase not build is then added to year-to-date actual, which is build. And the two of them give you a picture of how much budget you have left for the year. So my recommendation would be to add a sort of like a purchase not build column to the report, since I think it's there. That's just my comment about the report.
I'm not sure that I know where that information comes
No, I don't either, except Laura in the district's file has the purchase orders that are not billed, and I get a report that says 90, in fact, this says like, what is that for me? 50, I'm trying to get to the right column.
Is that to the entire committee, or is that just important to you? And so is that something that you can take a look at the report, you know what the information is?
Well, I mean, I look at it to determine how much I have left to spend versus what I've spent.
Yeah, I think the problem we have here is we still need to decide how we are going to classify the landscaping and other charges that are currently in the O&M report. And I'm not sure we have that same information available
I think you're probably correct.
for the O&M report. So I would suggest that we, at least at this point, that we don't add that, but that if we decide, depending upon how we decide to classify the expenses, then we might look at that.
If I could make a couple
Yeah.
of comments here.
Sure.
When I first took this on, it was, I knew nothing about it, and so I've been trying to dig through it. Laura has helped, Scott has helped considerably. I went to the former treasurer, to Glenn, and talked to him as well. And my process is to try to make it as simple as possible and give you some numbers that you're interested in.
Right.
And so I'll be glad to include whatever you want. And Scott and I met again yesterday, and we kind of agreed that I like to see what the money's been spent for. Is it landscaping, is it roads, is it security, and so on and so forth. You know, we're gonna get to another bar chart here shortly, but this kind of gives us in a nutshell, in my opinion, here's what the district is, that's where their numbers are at, here's where the HOA numbers are at, and here's what the balance sheet says, here's how much unallocated money that you still have to spend, and so on and so forth. That's why I put it together in this particular format. Now, you can't reconcile all these numbers because in the middle of the year, it's my understanding, a lot of money was transferred from one budget to another and so on and so forth. So it can't be reconciled right now, but hopefully it's going to come out fine at the end of the year. And so that's why I put it together in this format, and I'm open to change it any way that you folks want because it really is a committee document, and so I'll be glad to do whatever you want.
Well, I like the format, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying
Yeah.
that if it was available in all systems, it would be something, because it just tells us how much we've really already allocated. And we really, even though this says we have 47.9% that we've spent, we might have another 40% that's already allocated, which means we have contracts signed. It's just not been billed yet.
I understand. I try to make it, simple stupid is what I call it, I guess. That I get a report from the district. It gives me all the top numbers, and so I gotta do is plug them in. I get a report from Scott and on the HOA expenses, so I gotta do is plug them in. And then, of course, I get from the accounting folks, I get the balance sheet information, so I plug that in. So I know before Glenn was giving you, if I remember right, he was giving you Scott's sheet, and then at the bottom, he put the balance sheet information on there. All I did is try to make myself a template that I could go ahead and plug it in this way. And so I don't know if that's okay, that's what I'll continue. If not, I'll be glad to change it.
And would you propose to have this bar chart also?
Well, no, if I can explain that real, and I'll try to be real quick.
Is that
In my opinion, the $2.9 million is all Pelican Reserve money.
right?
I mean, it's all owners of Pelican Reserve. And so if they came to you and asked you, where's my money being spent at? And so I went ahead and tried to put together this bar chart. And I don't think this needs to be done every month. I think maybe it could be done at the end of the year, or maybe even twice a year, something like that. But if somebody asks you the question, what money is being spent for landscaping, you can go in there and see that, hey, landscaping is 21% of the money that we bring in. And I'm a visual sort of a person, rather than going through a spreadsheet and picking out numbers here and here and here and here. That's why I put it together in this particular fashion. Again, if that's of interest to you, I'd be more than happy to do this whenever we think that it's necessary to be done. It's not too difficult. If it's not of interest to you and you don't think it's necessary, then I'll just go ahead and
By the way, I think the whole thing, I think what you proposed is excellent. I think it's a very, condensed version, but gives the essential information. And I also think this chart is good, but I agree. I don't think we need it on a monthly basis.
No.
But we could ask you to bring it at particular times of the year.
Well, at the end of the year, you know how much it's been spent for security, how much
Right.
it's been spent for landscaping and so on and so forth. And if somebody asks you the question, you're gonna have it right there. And it might even be something that you want to put on a website or something else at the end of the year.
Yes. Okay. I think that's very good. The only thing I would say is that when we would probably do this, if there are any special things that have occurred where and I see you already have a thing for the boardwalk, for instance, that you will put notes, maybe some limited notes on the schedule.
On the monthly one one, you mean?
Yeah. Which, you know, if you feel they are needed to describe what's happening, are there
Well, I
places?
put them under each category. They're under the district one. I put
Yes.
two different comments in there under the HOA.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I mean, that I think, you know, in my opinion, that's what we need. Any further discussion about this? Well, I think,
Alan, I also really like your format here. And Doug brings up a good point in terms of things that are not expense, but are actually accomplished in terms of a purchase order being put in. So I think only toward the end of the budget year is it maybe more important for you and Scott to kind of, you know, come up with that number. Where are we relative to our budget at the very end?
Are you talking about for the bar chart you're talking about?
Well, what I'm talking about is items that you know, have been, a purchase order has been placed. So some of them we have a long, you know, 12, 14-week lead time for a light fixture as an example. So, you know, at the end, there might be, end of the year, if we could get maybe some kind of clarification about what has been spent and, you know.
a year-to-date estimate.
Yeah.
Could we, can we get that for the?
Yeah, maybe the month before the end of the fiscal year
Yeah.
or so.
I would assume that we could get that for the CDD numbers as well. Okay, so maybe we should have
Just a one-time read it toward
Yeah.
the end so we understand where we're going to end up.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
Any other comments? If not, I think we accept this. The committee accepts this. I think it's the consensus that this is very good. I think this is an excellent approach, Alan, and thank you for that.
Yep.
Um,
It's taken a lot of time and it's, but
Yeah.
yeah, I've learned a lot from it.
Yeah. It'll make it easier going forward. Yes. Yep. Okay. Thank you. Okay, now, as I mentioned, Chelsea O'Reilly has, from the CDD, our manager from the general manager for the CDD, has a special thing to present to us. So
Yes.
Chelsea, I'm going to leave it to you at this
Oh,
point.
thank you. Good morning. So I want to apologize for springing this on you so last minute, but this just came up with us, with the district, with our bond group yesterday. As you all know, the district is proceeding with bond validation and financing. We actually have on the call here with us Rhonda Mossing and Stephen Bloom. Okay, thank you. So as part of reviewing these projects and the bond financing, we realized that Pelican Preserve would benefit from some of the projects that are proposed, the admin building being the largest dollar. In the bond validation letters and notices that have gone out, Pelican is not included as of right now. After determining staffing in the bond group, there's like 50 of us, it seems like, we need to reevaluate this and include Pelican Preserve in their share of the cost. So these numbers are fresh. I'm not going to tell you that they're 100% accurate because we're still reviewing them, but this gives based on number, and Rhonda, feel free to chime in. This is the numbers that are projected. So to explain bonds, the bond validation process that goes in front of the board on August 4th for that public hearing, like the budget, sets the cap. Okay, that's the final most not to exceed number. As we continue to move forward, you go through you issue different series, which is actually approving the projects and approving a dollar amount associated to such projects. The first series is the dollar value you see up top, which is projected to be $10,105,000. Of that, the administrative CIP of it is $3,265,000. The proportion, the percentage proportion, based on the assessment methodology that Pelican would benefit from is 33%. 33% of 3,265,000 is the $1,077,450. Now, what we're asking of this board today is how, we understand the percentages may be up for debate, perhaps, but we're basing this off of the assessment methodology and of our experienced hired professionals, that the Pelican share is that 1 million number. Now, what I need from this board is how you would like to proceed with financing. And I ask that because if you want to be included in as part of the bond process, we have to go back and include you as part of the assessment area, send out notices, schedule hearings. There's a list, a to-do list that we have to do. If you choose to take it out of your reserves, we would continue on with the bond validation process as it sits today. The third scenario would be for Pelican to take out a note, 5-year note. So there's different, so for each scenario, I'll go through. Please don't hesitate to ask a question. I will do my best to answer. We have the team on that Rhonda may be able to answer as well. Rhonda, do you want to try to?
Chelsea, I think maybe before we go through that, is I think that people ought to recognize that all of the overhead costs that are allocated to Pelican Preserve by the district in the budget, these are the expenses. We only get 14% of what is effectively the overhead. Here they're saying we're going to get 33%. And so we really have two issues. One of them is should we accept a 33% allocation of those expenses? And I believe we should not. I don't see why we should take 33% of the bond expenses and only 14 and the expense only get 14% of the regular expenses during the year. I think the 14% is more reflective of what what Pelican Preserve actually uses uses, if I can use that word, of the overhead. So that issue needs to be determined, and that will be determined by the board. But I think we want to go forward to say that we object to a 33% allocation of these expenses and say that we really feel that it should be on the same basis as all the other expenses, which would be 14%. So there's that issue. And then there's the issue of that Rhonda is, or that Chelsea is going to go forward with here as to how we want to, whatever the number is, whether it's 33% or 14%, how do we want to pay it? How do we want to finance it?
So that's the end result that we're looking for direction from this board today, because that's what staff needs in order to continue moving forward.
Phil, but the person or the board is a CDD board that makes the decision on the 14 versus the 33, correct?
That's correct.
I mean, we have no decision process in that process.
Well, other than that we have
Recommendation.
Yes.
Okay.
We can give recommendations, and I think come out very strongly about that. We have two Pelican Preserve residents who are on the board, and I think we should register an objection to the 33%. But that's a separate issue from how we finance it.
The calculations are based off of the EAUs, and Pelican has 3,116.59 EAUs. Right. I was on the phone with Russ prior to stepping into this meeting, and there's an explanation behind it. I would love for him to get in front of you, but it's basically Pelican is a third of the entire district.
But we should point out that, yes, we are a third of the district, but we do not use a third of any of these services.
Right.
And so all the other expenses, we only get 14%, which is more reflective of what we actually take, what we actually use. And I don't see why the bond situation should be any different than the rest of the expenses. Yes, we are a third of the EAUs, but we are not a third of the overhead. We don't make that kind of use of the staff and all the other things that we're charged for.
So let me see if I can explain
Well,
this real quick. So this is a debt methodology, and it's not an O&M methodology, which that's where we're getting the 14%. The debt methodology determines administrative cost benefit by the EAUs. Both Gateway and Pelican have equivalent assessment units already determined, and that's how this value came. But nonetheless, regardless of the percentage, what I'd like for direction is how you would like to proceed. If it's through a bond financing, taking the funds from your existing capital reserve, or issuing a 5-year note.
So I
Phil,
recognize.
I think we got to determine if it's 15%, the total amount is a lot different. And
Yes.
that makes a difference on where we may want to get the money.
Yes, John, I think that, but yes, it could make a difference. Yeah.
At 15%, what would our expense be?
Well,
About half.
about half of what you see on here. All of these things are 14%,
Be less than half.
Yeah.
it'll be less than half. Yeah, it'd be
So-
40,
Can somebody have a calculator to do it real quick?
would be about 40%.
So
It would be about 40% of the numbers you see on here. Well, the
depending on
admin costs, that $1,077,450 would be $457,100. And all the other costs you see on there, I think
So what I could recommend is if this board would like to say, okay, if the percentage is the 33, this is how we would like to proceed. If the percentage is 14, this is how we would like to proceed. That way we have clear direction on the board, Pelican's desire.
okay, if we think there's a difference. I think, but the first thing I would like to say is that I hope it is the consensus of the committee that we should object to the 33%. Because that is not appropriate in my opinion, but I solicit other comments.
Phil, I agree with you. Do we need a vote or do we just take a consensus?
Well, I think if we can get a consensus of the committee.
I agree with you, Phil.
Yeah.
I agree.
Others?
I agree.
Yep, okay, I
Yes.
think, so you need to carry that forward.
Can you repeat it so I'm clear?
Okay. You know, that the consensus of that the PPAC finds objectionable the 33%, and that we feel that 14%, which is the way we are allocated other expenses, is the appropriate amount.
Okay, and so if we were to proceed based on the 14% number,
Yeah.
how would the board like to address the financing options?
No, so then,
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I think the easiest way would be to take it out of our reserves, because then we're not paying any bond interest or carrying costs, whether it's the note, the bond. I think it's easier and cleaner just to take it out of the reserves.
I think
And we pay for it once.
one could make the argument, however, that the beneficiaries of this are not only the people here now, but the people in the future, and that it might make sense in that case to do it as part of the bond. But
If we do it as part of a bond, that will go on our property taxes.
that's correct. It would be part of your
Increase.
your assessment. So next year,
Right.
There would-
Next year,
There would be a separate debt assessment if
Yep.
it were to proceed through the bond, just like everyone else in Gateway, they would have a separate assessment strictly for this debt.
and I think you can look at the annual debt service per EAU on scenario 1. And assuming that we are successful in having this put in at 14%, that $29.75 would be reduced to about $12.
Phil, if I
Yeah, go ahead.
Bill
Bill?
Srico for the Pelican Community Association. I would suggest that taking it out of the reserves is counterproductive. You guys have been superbly careful about how you've spent the community's money, and you built these reserves
Yeah.
for that rainy day, or for the kinds of expenses we're looking at now going forward in things like we want to do with lighting or landscaping or improvements in the ponds areas. If you now suck those reserves dry to save $12 per household or $30 per household per year, you're only going to have to replenish those reserves. So it becomes tomorrow's debt anyway. I would strongly suggest that you consider following the Greater Gateway's pattern, which I believe is to take it out under the 20-year bond proviso. And that $29.75 going forward, and I think that already includes an assessment for inflation, does it not?
I believe so.
I mean, in real terms,
It's minor.
it's minor.
And it would be flat for the entire 20 years.
Exactly.
So I think that's positive. Other comments on that? By the way, I concur with Bill's comments. I think we should be part of the 20-year bond. I agree that we should be careful. We should be husbanding our reserves for things that we need to do.
If we had to replenish the reserves, we're going to have a yearly money to go back to replenish the reserves anyway. So we're going to have an additional expense, whether we're replenishing the reserves or doing a 20-year bond, either way.
Carol, do you still feel that we should take it out of the reserves?
Well, this is mainly for the new administrative building, correct? None of the other bond things are involved here. You're just talking about the new building and the expenses related to that.
I believe it's the building, and then there's an accounting software that we're upgrading our systems that Pelican would benefit from taking those services in-house.
We suspect that the accounting system upgrade is probably relatively small.
It's nominal compared to the construction.
Pretty small number.
And while I appreciate the fact that we want to object to the 33%, and we will, but this is a bonding mechanism as opposed to how much benefit you get for the money you put in. And because it's been determined that this is based on the number of paying people into the bonds, we would be 33%. I think realistically, we have to look at that 33% figure. I think we can object to it, and that's fine, and we should put our muscle into objecting to it. But I think what the bond people are going to tell you is that that 33% is 33%, and you should be looking at that $1 million number, not at the rest of it.
Other comments? I'd like to get the sense of the committee as to which of the scenarios, 1, 2, or 3, you think we should follow. We have somebody else who has a comment to make.
Bob Geppert from Monticello. Carol, you raised a good point about the bond requirements. And I guess in that case, if it is a bond requirement, then it must be 33%. I would like PPAC to consider going back and taking it out of reserve simply because If we took it out of reserves, it's 457,000, we're done. But if we are required to do the 33%, then it's $1,077,000. So just looking at it that way. Now, if we can prevail at 14% with the 20-year bond, that's the best case scenario. But if it's not an option because of bond requirements, then I think it kind of makes sense to spend half the money, get it 50 cents out of the dollar and get it out of the way.
457,
14%.
457.
14%.
We calculated the number of
Yeah,
1,077,450. It was a meeting before this. And at 14%, that million would become $457,100.
The difference between.
In a meeting,
I'm sorry.
Mike, please.
Yeah.
Sorry. The difference between taking it out of reserves or paying it in one, or paying it over the 20 years is the difference between the 1,230,000
Right.
under the 33% scenario, or the 1,077,450 under the 33% scenario, right? So you're looking at a difference really of $123,000.
Yep, good math.
Okay, that roughly $123,000 between one or the other. But at the same time, what you will have done is you will have bankrupted your reserves, which you're going to have to pay back. So why would you put yourself in the position of having no flexibility going forward to save $23,000?
Okay, your premise of the 23,000, I completely disagree with.
The 1,230 versus the
Excuse me,
1,077.
Excuse me, I was quiet while you talked. If we paid it, Chelsea, correct me if I'm wrong, if we paid it in lump sum, paying 457,100.
At 14%.
But that's an assumption of 14%.
That's an assumption of.
correct.
Correct.
And we can do it at 14% because we won't be in violation of any bond rules. And that's the whole premise of taking it to the board.
I'm not sure who's speaking, but I can't hear them.
Yeah, this is Bob. If we want to take advantage of the 14 versus 33, what I thought I heard from Carol was, and this has to be validated, but if the 33% is a requirement of the district to do the bond, then the opportunity for this PPAC is to not become a part of that and make a one-time payment of 14%, which is $457,000. I hope that's clear. If you're part of the 30-year bond and you're part of, you have to pay 33%, we're going to pay $1,077,000. If you're not a part of the bond and you just make a direct payment and we prevail with the board at 14%, we're getting this whole thing at 50 cents on the dollar.
This is Rhonda Moore from NBS Capital Markets. I think there's some confusion.
Rhonda, it's very staticky.
It's almost feedback.
Yeah, I don't-
Okay.
Oh,
I
try
reserves
again,
too,
Rhonda.
very,
Okay,
very much.
thank you for your comment.
Well,
Rhonda, you have a comment?
yes, I think there's some confusion with regard to what's required by the bond versus no bond. It's not a matter of what's required by the bond. The assessment methodology, which was prepared by your assessment consultant, determined that the benefit to Pelican Preserve is 33%. And based upon that, it doesn't really matter how you finance it. It's 33%. So if you finance it with a 20-year bond, you're talking about $1,230,000 in principal. But in addition to that, you'll be paying interest over those 20 years. So it's not just $1,230,000 if you finance it with the 20-year bond. It's principal and interest. But it comes out to be $29.75 per unit per year. If you take it from your reserves, it's still 33% until the assessment consultant says it's different. You're still paying $1,077,450, and that means you're not paying financing costs if you take it out of your reserves, and you're not going to pay interest on it for the next 20 years. Then if you decide to do the 5-year note, which most people think isn't the way to go, but it's an option, you'll be paying more in financing costs, and that has to do with the shorter term and a higher reserve fund requirement. And you'll be paying that off over a period of 5 years, but you'll pay you'll be paying the $1,365,000 in principal plus interest over 5 years. But no matter which alternative you pick, if the assessment consultant says your benefit's 33%, you're going to pay 33%.
The per EAU numbers, Rhonda, just to confirm it, is total debt financing. Is that right? So it's interest, the per EAU number is both principal and interest.
There's 2 per EAU numbers. One is par debt per EAU. That's the principal only.
Right.
The annual debt service per EAU, for example, under the 20-year bond, you'd be paying $29.75 per year for 20 years.
Right. And that's principal. It's the total of principal plus interest. Is that right?
Right. So I got my calculator going, and it's $29.75 times 20, $595 total under the 20-year bond per unit.
Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that. Okay.
One thing for Rhonda, Bob Geppert again. The way that our district operates, Rhonda, and has operated for the last 10 or 15 years, is that the total administrative costs for the district are divided by the residents, except that Pelican Preserve has something called the non-connectivity clause, and historically has paid 14% of the total. Even though we're 30% of the residents, 33% of the geography, 33% of everything, the amount that we have historically paid because of the fact that our residents do not partake of the facilities and things over here is 14%. So that's where this number is coming from. Totally different than Russ's methodology or anything else.
Well, I think in Russ's methodology, I've read it a couple of times. I know how he's doing it, and what he's arguing that, and I hate to speak for him because this isn't really my area, but I've read it and I've tried to understand it. What he's saying is the overhead costs that you're paying of 14% is different than paying a debt service capital cost of 33%. And what he's saying is that you're not benefiting by 33% of the total overhead, which is the administrative operations of all those facilities that you don't use. But for this specific facility, which is the administration building, he's saying that that should be based upon the number of ERUs in the district that is benefiting from that facility, and your percentage based upon your ERUs. And he further backed it up with the number of acres within each area within Pelican Preserve and outside Pelican Preserve. They both came out to be between EAUs and acres, 33%.
I completely understand that, but
And that's
it's
just what he told me, yeah.
totally separate from the burden of cost. The burden of cost should be 14%. And I know that's a discussion we're going to have with Russ. And Mr. Measy and I have had a number of conversations with him to understand the methodology. I think we both do. It doesn't apply in this case because the benefit to the residents of Pelican will not exceed 14%.
So Phil, if I can go back
Yeah.
to beat a dead horse. I'm looking for direction from PPAC.
Right.
So again, regardless of the percentage, this board can make a motion to say, if X, this is how we would like to proceed, or if Y, this is how we'd like to proceed. Now, from the district perspective, we have to rely on our professionals who do this assessment methodology and review this.
Right.
So I would like clear direction from PPAC on how, if we were to go with the 33%, you would like to see this method, or if it does end up being the 14%, this is how you would like to fund this.
Okay, go ahead, Doug.
I was just saying, we don't need to debate the 33 and 14. We've had that discussion here for a
Right.
while. We aren't going to make that decision. We
I agree.
objected to it.
Yep.
we're done.
Okay.
And let's move on to saying which
Yes, I
method are we
agree.
going to do?
I agree, and I would like people's input on which methodology to use. Bill, you have one more comment?
One last comment, very, very quick, just to do the quick math. At 33% or 14, what you would be doing if you took it out of reserves is either depleting your unassigned reserves by 80% or 40% roughly. So that's really the question facing you. Do you want to take your unassigned reserves and deplete them potentially by 80% if you don't go the 20-year bond method?
Okay, Randy, where do you stand?
I think one of the things that we don't do enough of is talk about paying down debt. Now, we just incurred a debt that we didn't have any pre-knowledge of or opportunity to influence in any way. In my view, that's not different than using reserve funds to put a new roof on the Gatehouse because it's needs it. So if in fact we, are required to pay some fee, I think we should take it out of reserve funds. The idea of having a special assessment line on the tax volume for 20 years is just another indication, I think, to our constituents that we're not controlling our expenses.
But I would, one
Go ahead.
thing, and then we can,
Yeah,
I think
go
we
ahead.
should get in both.
Okay, so Randy, you would say take it out of reserves.
Yeah.
That's what.
Yes.
Whether we put $29 into rebuilding reserves for 20 years to get the reserves back, or whether we put $29 into the bond, it's still $29 that we're going to have to assess, because you're taking it out of the reserves, you got to put it back in. And it's going to be a 29 times the 20 years, the same thing to bring that million, I'm just going to round it up, the $1 million back in there. So I mean, I think I would recommend one.
Okay. Where do you stand, Alan?
So it's $29.75 per resident per year.
Right.
For up to 20 years.
Yeah.
Plus-
In my opinion, we would go with scenario one simply because, let's say I own my place for 10 years. I'm going to pay that for 10 years. Somebody else buys my place. They need to share in that as well. Because otherwise, if I pay it off ahead of time, I'm paying it off for somebody else as well. And I don't like the idea of depleting all the reserves because there's going to be more things that come down the pipe. Right. We're going to need that money for.
You're going to have to put it back in.
Yes. So I go with number one.
Mark?
I agree with what Alan's rationale is. I hate to deplete the reserves down that much and have something happen and suddenly you're calling a special meeting, special assessment. And then, in my opinion, it can really look bad in front of people if you didn't plan.
Okay, John, where do you come out here?
I'm not hearing everybody's comments, but I would like to make a recommendation that we as a board only make our recommendation based on the 15%. Let's not do the
We're not in a
15% and then another recommendation on 33%. No, we've decided it's 15%. Let's just make our recommendation on the 15%.
John, we're not in a position to do that. We've got to give Chelsea some direction, even if it's the 33%, I'm afraid. I mean,
Why
that's,
can't we find out what it's going to be?
well, it's going to take some time to find out, and we have to make this recommendation based on what we know now. She needs a recommendation because if we want to do the 20-year bond scenario, there's a lot of work to be done.
Yes, sir.
Can we make a recommendation and then are we going to do a formal vote?
Yeah, we could do a formal vote.
See, I would like to recommend, whether it's 14 or 33, that we go with option one. Would be my recommendation.
That's your motion?
Yes.
Okay, do we have a second?
I say.
That's moved and seconded. Further comments? Carol, I'm sure you may have comments.
Well, since we are budgeting this year, 200,000 to go into the reserves, I think it'd be wiser to refresh our reserves over the next 3 to 5 years than take out a note or have it on our property taxes. But I do understand we're all old and we probably will, I mean, I will not be here in 20 years. So I would still like to see it taken out of reserves. I think when you have to take a hit, you take the hit and move on and manage the rest of the money so well that you replenish those reserves. And I think that's possible. The committee is very diligent on that. So I would, so are you taking a vote on Doug's motion?
We will be taking a vote on Doug's motion, yes. We haven't taken it.
Those were my comments. So,
We're discussing Doug's motion now.
right.
Alan has a comment.
Yeah, Chelsea, if, let's say, for instance, we do go with number one, option number one, and 2 years from now, we have some excess reserves, can you pay that down at that point?
Rhonda, can you
Rhonda?
answer that?
Yes, not only can you pay it down at any time, but any resident who is assessed for this bond issue can pay it down at any time after the bonds are issued. So if they wanted to pay down their debt, they'd pay it down to $395 and they'd be done. They wouldn't get the assessment on their bill.
So I think that's another reason why we need to go with option one, and if we have some excess reserves, we can choose at that particular point to pay down the bond.
Okay. Any other comments? If not, I'll take a vote. All in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
4. John?
Aye.
Okay. All opposed?
No. Or I to being opposed.
Okay, so the motion passes 5-2.
Okay.
Chelsea, you have your.
Thank you very much for your
direction.
patience today and helping us get through this. And we'll be sure to bring updates back to the board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Ron. Thanks, Rhonda.
Thank you.
Okay, we need to move on to the budget. And I direct you to, which you've been sent, the comments that were made by Laura Leroy about the changes we've made to the budget. We were at our not to exceed budget number, and we have taken that, at least right now, down by $154,000. So I would ask for comments on the budget as it's currently proposed. And you have that, you have those numbers.
Yes, I mean, can you just put it on the screen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, can we?
Bill, the note that came out, well, I got mine yesterday from CDD with those increases and stuff like that. Is that these numbers we're talking about, or is
No.
that's
something completely different. Laura, you,
I'm gonna pass out 2 sheets. And I believe I asked Georgia to send these, well, Doug, you weren't here last time because I thought we were gonna get to it. Carol, well, I'll make sure you get it. Here's my copy. So the sheet with the 1 on it is with the original changes that were only requested by PPAC. The second sheet I'm going to give you, and it has a number 2 on it, is with the moves that you requested for the landscaping, if you're gonna have the landscape work group. So overall, it did not make a very large difference. It was $14,000 overall, the way it ended up getting split up. So your change year over year with version 1 would be a 5.7% increase for multifamily and a 2.6 for single. And if we went with version 2, it would be a 3.5% for multifamily and a 0.7 for single family. So there's basically remain flat compared to last year. But based on the conversations I was half listening to while I was doing other things, it looks like there may be some further changes to the budget.
Can we put these up on the screen?
Let me get my
Sure, sure.
laptop. Just a minute. Georgia's gonna scan them and I'll have them available.
Would you again describe what 1 is versus 2?
Just a minute. Use this. So version 2 is after the changes that were requested to create those additional landscape lines for the landscape work committee. Version 1 was before those changes were made. So version 1 was where I increased the HOA line based on the information that I got from Scott, because you had some of those extra expenses this year for landscape things that I was not aware of when we did the original budget, such as my sheet here. The extra trimming for the hardwoods that needs to get done every 2 years, and some of the palm trimming. There was some historic, it says based on history replacements for the non-contractual landscaping, that was 36,000. The tree line entrance project I did not have in there. So what Scott gave was quite a bit higher than what I had calculated. So that's where that came from. That's where version 1 is. So that just that included the increase in the HOA, what you guys call O&M. On ours it says HOA reimbursement. And then version 2 is moving those things off of that line. I can get it. Okay.
So which one has the $800,000 for the O&M
Version 1.
version?
And then I'm sorry, Laura, then version 2 has the line items that deal with landscape moved over into the CDD budget
Correct.
line items. And what was left remains in the HOA.
Correct.
Okay. And that's number 2.
Correct.
Okay.
There was not a large impact overall. It went from a 10.6 total change to a 10.2% change. It did impact on the bottom line. This is version 1, so 5.7% for multifamily, 2.6 for single. And then if you move those to if you make those changes to moving the expenses from the O&M line to the landscape lines, it does get parsed out a little differently, where version 2, which is a 3.5% and then a 0.7.
Laura, the difference though between those isn't because of the fact you moved them to the landscape lines, it's that you use different values of what you were going to put in there.
Correct. Yes.
I mean, if you had just moved them from one to the other, they'd
it
be
wasn't
identical.
a flat move, no.
Right. I mean, they'd be identical.
Correct.
Okay. Right. It's just that we changed.
Well, and you absorbed some of there were some costs that were included in the O&M line that we took out, was, where's my total? $48,500 that the Ponds group is going to just absorb if you go with version 2. So that was removed completely from the budget. Doug said that he was confident that he would be able to absorb those additional costs or those additional projects into his existing budget without having to add those dollars.
A lot of that was the.
And you had reduced yours by some earlier too, so that basically.
Well, yeah, you made a reduction first, right?
Yep, that's
a
included in
double.
both of these versions. So he reduced it and he's taking this additional on. So it's about $100,000
I had
total.
already, they had come forward with the fountains and the aeration that is part of the master agreement now. I agreed quite a while back. to be able to take them over from Terry.
Okay. Scott, you have,
Scott Charnock, Pelican Reserve. Do we have a spreadsheet on what was removed from the O and M so I can update?
I do, but my laptop is locked up right now. I'll get it
Okay.
to you.
All right, if you could send that to me, that way I can change it,
Yep.
get it over to Ellen and the rest of the committee. Thank you.
Very different from this.
Mr. Chairman, I think if landscape is going to become a part of the P-PAC, it should have its own line items. It should have its own budget. So just like Doug has to control his ponds budget, Mark is going to have to control the landscape budget. And I think it makes sense to have it all in one place under the CDD.
And the landscape budget with the changes that I made in version 2, I believe you were in my office and I added separate lines for each of those items. So the landscape area has a total expense and it is broken out by line. So you can track how you're spending against those.
Right. I think that is going to be, that will give Mark and his group, the landscape, their own identity and their own place. And it'll be tracked in one place for everybody to see what is happening. I like version 2.
I would suggest that we have not made a decision as to exactly how the relationship between the O&M and the landscaping and the rest of the budget, that still is a determination to be made as to how we're going to categorize these things. What I'd like to do is just focus on the numbers, and I think that the two versions confuse that focus. We eventually want to decide how we categorize things.
If to make it simple, version 1 is without the landscape work group line items, version 2 includes them.
Version 1 is without the landscape.
Correct.
It isn't
When you say it's without the landscape items,
They were not broken out separately. Version 2 is where we took some of the items out and the ponds work group is going to take some of the cost of that. And I broke out the district asset landscape out of contract landscape items on version 2. So basically version 1 is without the landscape work group. Version 2 is with the changes, with the landscape work group and the changes that are on that giant spreadsheet that was just handed out to you.
but you're saying it's without the landscape work group
Version 1 does not include the changes on that big sheet that you were just handed.
by Bob.
Correct. They were not broken
But
out of the
that's
O&M.
That's just a recategorization, right?
Not 100%, but very close. There's that $48,500
$500,
that was absorbed by the ponds work group that's included in version 1, but not in version 2.
right? But that's the only difference, is that right?
Yes.
Basically, Bob Geppert, Monticello. Basically, this sheet the dollars are kind of immaterial. I have to call Scott's numbers. If there's a couple of bucks one way or the other, that was not the intent. I'm satisfied with whatever his numbers are. But the philosophical change here is this spreadsheet conforms to what I thought was the intent of the June meeting of P-PAC, in which you guys stated you wanted to move as many things into the district accounting system as we could and out of the Castle accounting system. So I used the Castle numbers and then took these particular items out. The farmost right-hand column is where Doug accepted some other earlier transfers. So what this fundamentally does is create the out-of-contract items to the tune of $321,704 into would be the landscape budget. The actual dollars really are the same. It's just the philosophical, are we moving it away from Castle and into the district's accounting system? I think that's about as simple as I can put it.
But Bob, I mean, I would say instead of moving it away from Castle, we're moving it from their financial system to the district's
Yeah.
financial system.
So they'll
It
write the
doesn't,
checks.
what would make a distinction, that's a different thing. I mean, Scott and Castle, let's just call it
Right,
Castle,
right.
will still probably approve the, you know what I mean, the invoice one says, do you pay this invoice? I would think that Scott and Castle would still do that approval. It would just go through the district system to do that, as opposed to the Castle system.
You are
to do that.
exactly correct in terms of the existing Ameriskate contract,
Right.
both fixed price
Yep.
and the variables. The only variance to that might be is if the landscape work group and Scott agree to do something and they choose a company other than Ameriskate. If for whatever reason, I don't know that'll ever happen, but if it would occur, then it would still come out of the district money, but that would be the only variance. But yeah, Scott would have all the.
Well, I mean, all this does is put it all into, closer to all into one system.
Correct, and for clarity.
And Laura, the majority of, a lot of landscaping is already over there with the Ameriscape yearly contract.
$539,000.
Is already over in the district's system.
Correct.
So all we're doing is moving some of these other line items over to the same place the majority of the landscape budget is already.
Right.
Correct?
Yep.
And again, that is in version 2. Excuse me.
Bob Geppert, I have a question. Are you saying that your recommendation would be to go with version 2?
Yeah, I guess that's the net result. Yeah, the whole proposal was to try and write down what I thought was feedback intent in the June meeting, that as much as could be effectively and easily moved over. And it makes sense to do this effective October 1st of the new budget year.
So go with version 2.
Yeah, I'm printing the summary from version 2 right now. George is gonna grab it. So there's just one page that shows all the actual changes that were made.
I'm a little confused. What are I understand the first column is budget from 21. Second column is labeled budget 22. What is the green column?
The 23.
If the 22 budget, the green column is the 22 budget with the monies that we're proposing come over here. Listen, in other words, we spent $63,000 in 22 on item 1. The proposal for 23 is 130,000. So if the 130,000 stayed over here, then that would come to some number. But by moving it over to the district, we're still taking Scott's number of what should be spent. But instead of it being in the O&M, it's over at the district.
Well, I'll go down to my favorite O&M agreement expense in account 706571, where now it's $47,000, whereas the contract was $93,411. So you arbitrarily eliminated $46,000.
Based on conversations we've had.
By the way, Laura, in version 2, what is the expense for that line item that Bill just mentioned in version 2?
Thank you.
I think that's the question you have, Bill.
$47,000.
Okay.
Okay, so I got to make the position of the community association clear. We've done this over and over again. We have a contract with the district. It's called the O&M agreement. The O&M agreement specifies $93,411. That agreement has not been changed yet. We've agreed to negotiate a change, but it's contingent upon some things happening, including the withdrawal of the proposal to move the control of landscaping out of the community association and move that into the landscape working group. That hasn't happened yet. We're more than willing to negotiate that change. We said we are. If those other things happen, they haven't happened. And to budget below an existing contract, in my mind, is somewhat ill-advised. For $40,000 or $46,000, money should be in here. And God bless you, if we negotiate a settlement to this landscape thing someday, we can add it to the reserves.
By the way, Laura, one last question there, and I apologize. Is the 93 411 for that same line item? What is in version 1 for that line item? 706,571. What's in version 1?
That would include the full charges.
So some of the difference between version 1 and 2 is that 47,000.
Correct.
It is the primary difference.
Yeah, I would say.
The difference between version 1 and version 2 is actually, there's some mistakes in the spreadsheet that Bob gave you.
Mr. Chairman,
They weren't quite translated correctly, but the difference between the one and the other is about $62,000, most of which
It's 47. I got you.
is the 47.
yeah, and I have no problem with 47 being, for the budget purposes today, coming over. As Bill said, it is something we will negotiate,
Yeah.
but it's going to drop down. It's going to come to some number.
Yeah.
So I have no problem with that at all,
My suggestion is that we leave that number in there
for now.
for
Absolutely.
now.
Yep. No problem.
So that we have the number of it, we have those dollars available.
Yeah.
The question then becomes recategorization. So we're looking at version 1 in terms of the bucks. And the question is now, do we want to recategorize the rest of the expenses? Mark, I don't know whether you have any view on this.
I thought that was the intent when we were starting the landscape work group, was to get it separated out and into the system of the CDD.
I think it's hard to see. What I have on the screen is the paper that was handed out to the people that are in the room. So I didn't want the people online to be excluded from looking at this. I'm sure it's really tiny on your screen and I apologize. So this is version 2. So anything that's highlighted here in yellow is a change from this budget that was approved by the Gateway Board of Supervisors in June. So version 3 on this sheet here, just ignore the 3, but these numbers are what produced the sheet that has the 2 on it that I handed out. That's where that came from. So all of these items here, you can see I moved them from the HOA line, and I noted that they were moved. And so then that breaks out all of these additional landscaping expenses. And so this was done in anticipation of the landscape work group coming to fruition. It also includes Doug's reduction, his original reduction of $41,000. This number down here is $370,000. The sheet that Bob handed out showed there was like $368,000. I like round numbers, so I rounded up to 370. It sounds like that will need to be adjusted to include the additional expense, the additional $46,000 that was reduced for the castle fees, but that's easy enough to do. Let's just push a button and recalculate. And then down here, there was a reduction. I can blow this up a little bit. On this line, there was a reduction of $100,000 into your capital reserves. They're originally the approved budget was $365,000, and then there was a request to lower that to $200,000 for this year.
It was 165.
So that was a $165,000 reduction there. So if you look at, let me pull this up a little more. The overall, you took your budget down about $170,000 from what was approved by the Board of Supervisors in June to the version with the 2 on it that you're looking at right now.
That's what we are proposing to go forward with.
Right.
And it sounds like the only adjustment will need to be made to this line right here, pending whatever.
And about 90 of that came from the ponds budget.
Correct.
48.5 and the 41.
Yep.
And the 370 is,
That will need to get increased to include the additional administrative fees for Castle. So that'll go up.
So are we really just looking at moving the line items from one system to another, from the Castle system, financial? We're moving line items, just the line items, to the CDD system, financial system. Let's get rid of talking about that 47. That'll help things too. There really isn't much else except putting all the landscape things into one system as opposed to spanning two systems.
And
Correct.
again, that's your call. That is the biggest change between
is the
version one
biggest
and
change
version
between
two. Like
version-
all of these items that are,
Right. Except for the 48,000.
except for the, yes.
Yeah,
So this entire list of items right here is not included in version one. So
Okay.
all of these landscape things, the only thing that's included in version one is this line right here, just the contract, which we had started
Yep.
this current fiscal year.
Yep.
So these are all new. They were previously included down in the bottom in the HOA agreement line, so they're just they're being moved.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
obviously wasn't here for the June meeting, or I was here but not part of the board or the committee at that time. Can somebody explain the advantages?
Can somebody please speak into the microphone?
Sorry about that. Can somebody explain the advantages of doing this, and then are there disadvantages of doing this? And then I'd also like to know, is Mark going to be approving all the invoices then, or how is this going to work? How's the management of this going to work?
On your second question, I think how the management is going to work still needs to be determined.
The way that I would see it work is the same way that Doug does his stuff. If you guys want to have work done, PPAC needs to approve it. There's a form that we have for you to submit that shows lists everything that's required. A purchase order would be issued by the district, and then once the work is done, we would get your approval that it's done to your satisfaction, then we would release payment.
and Laura, today, Scott does that even though we moved the contract over to from Castle over to your systems.
The contract is handled completely separate because it's a flat fee every month. We just pay that.
Okay,
So anything that is outside of the contract, as far as landscaping services, is all handled by Scott at Castle. Right now, the district pays the static monthly contract. That's it for landscaping. We don't pay anything else.
okay.
So I'm a little more clear on this. Let's say that Mark has a $100,000 invoice for replacing a bunch of shrubs.
Mhm.
He has to approve that invoice, or it comes to you first, the bid
No,
comes
it
to
would
you?
come to the PPAC first for
Okay.
your approval, and then
Alright.
he would request a purchase order from the district. And then the district,
He requests a
Yep.
purchase order.
since it's his funds, like Doug requests them for the ponds, there's a form that gets filled out. He requests a purchase order. We issue the PO, and then when the invoice comes, then we would request that we would check in with you to see, is it done to your satisfaction? If you say yes, then we pay it.
Okay. Are you ready for this extra work, Mark?
I think so.
So
This is
invoicing.
all new. I mean,
Well,
Okay.
The question is.
Laura, could you explain who among this group would need to do that PO? I have seen that form and understand what you're talking about.
Yep, it would be
They may not.
whoever the person on PPAC or whoever I would say that on PPAC, who's part of the work group that the expenses are coming from. So like for ponds, it's Doug. And I think you do like the safety kind of things, and yours would be landscaping. So you would be the one, or anyone on PPAC could technically request it, but I personally would prefer that whoever is the main point of contact for that particular portion of the budget would request the PO.
And how do you learn of, or how do we find out that it's approved by the supervisory board?
No,
Prior to
PPAC approves
moving.
it.
Yes, but
The
It does not
supervisory
have
board
to
doesn't
be?
have, no,
As
They're your
long as it's
funds.
Within budget.
yes.
If you have the budget already there
I
and you
see.
haven't overspent
the-
on your budget, it
Right.
doesn't go back to CDD.
Okay.
The Board of Supervisors approve these funds to be spent on these items in your budget. So as long as you aren't, if you need to move funds around inside your budget, that would require more. But as long as you're spending within whatever was approved, we just do it.
Okay.
I have some concerns.
Yep.
Mark looks like a young man, is going to be here for quite a while. What happens if Mark all of a sudden you know, he's gone for whatever particular reason. Then is the next guy going to be able to step up and do that? At least right now, we've got somebody from a contract service who's always going to have somebody there. And those two work together all the time. And so I'm not so sure why we need to involve Mark in doing the paperwork on this and approving invoices and all that when we've got a contract person that's already there and they can work together and complete it.
Yeah. And I think they already are working together on some of the stuff that's currently going on, sure. Bill. But yes, I mean, I agree with you, Alan. I think it makes sense that we use our staff here to take on that part of the paperwork. The recommendations are going to be coming from Mark and the LWG. But it seems to me that the actual processing of these things ought to be done by Scott.
Yeah,
Castle.
if I might, Bill Cerrito from the Pelican Reserve Committee Association. I'm totally in agreement with Alan. The reason why we have an O&M agreement is just to do that, to provide staff services, not to make decisions, but to take all that administrative burden away from you guys. So when PPAC decides they want to do a project, landscape or otherwise, other than ponds, which is outside of the O&M agreement, we simply handle all the paperwork for you. I mean, and that's really what you're paying us, right? And I don't see any reason why moving it from one budget to another should necessarily change the administrative process. If you want to pay it out of the district checking account, God bless you, that's wonderful. There's probably some benefits to that. But there's no particular benefit in changing the administrative process as it exists today. That's why Scott and Ameriscape was there and Castle was there.
Laura, if as the group decides that Scott is the one to sign off on those things, and it's in your system, let's just say we move them over, is Scott able to do the same thing with you if we approve that?
That would be your, I mean, they're your funds, so it would be
We
your
would
decision
approve
who.
Scott being able to process that.
The Bob Geppert, Monticello, I guess they present the contrarian view, and particularly for you, Alan, because it's new. We have had positions, first of all, about Mark leaving or Doug leaving or I left. And the answer, the short-term answer is there is a backup system within the work groups. And ponds seamlessly changed. And we would certainly expect that with the landscape work group and safety and security, we would have a seamless change in those two groups because these people have been doing it and involved for years. The part of having Castle do it has always been at no cost to the district until 2019. There was a change in 2019 that we now pay those fine gentlemen $93,000 a year to do this. Ponds has done it without cost to the district. PPAC voted 5-0, 6-0 to make a landscape work group function the same way. So we've already had one vote that says this makes sense for us to do. But to your point about the administration, we have a whole system over here in the district that is ready, willing, and able to do it at no cost to us or within our 14% budget, what we've been paying. So why would we want to pay $93,000 in administration for something we can do for nothing and take that $93,000 and improve our community, improve it in landscaping, improve it in security, improve it in whatever. So that's the crux of the earlier conversations you missed. And Mr. Amizi and I have a disagreement on this. Clearly, he feels strongly that we should retain Castle. I have no problem with Castle functioning as they are, but we can move the funds and have it run by the work group and the checks paid by the district and not be incurred with that $47,000 or whatever the new negotiated number is. That thing is constantly moving. So that comes down to the crux of the issue that is before you. Is it worth $93,000 a year to have somebody write checks? Because the landscape work group is going to be out in the community and looking at what's going on. We are going to work collaboratively. This is a very important part of our community. So I know the PPCA is going to be involved. And I think that the demonstrated working relationship that Mark and Scott have right now is great and will continue. This is a financial kind of thing. We're not cutting anybody money except for possibly the fees we pay to Scott. We're just moving the administrative burden over here for them to write the checks. Thank you.
You're right. I am new at this, and that's just simply my opinion.
No, I
But
respect that.
the 93,000 to me shouldn't be an issue because that's going to be paid regardless. This is Pelican Preserve resident money. And just because you're paying 30, or not you, but just because the PPAC is paying 93,000, it's still going to be paid by the PPAC, and you're just sharing that. I mean, we're not going to reduce it by $93,000 so it's the same money to the residents, and so it just comes out of different budgets. That's all. And I agree that Ponds is doing a great job. I've heard nothing but great things about it. But what I'm trying to put across here is that, there's really no reason to burden Mark at this particular time. Let's just see how all this works with.
Well, Doug, is it a burden on you?
Well, I just say, let's go back. Here. One is how it's managed and the 90-some thousand dollars, and we get confused in that versus just the fact that moving a line item from one budget to another simplifies the system where everything's under one financial system, okay? It simplifies. When we go through a budget process, we spend sometimes hours that's different snapshot on capital system, and you've been looking at. Just because we moved the line item doesn't mean that Scott can't still do it the same way he does today. It's just that Mark says, you're okay, Scott, we're okay with Scott issuing the PO, or we're okay with him paying for it. See, I think we're confusing two separate things. If all we do is move line item one from one budget to line item one in another budget with the same amount, that's all we should be talking about. These other things are issues that we'll debate for years, and we've been debating them for years.
Every year at budget time, we've always struggled.
That's
has
the only
always
thing I care
struggled to
about.
understand
Yeah,
the genesis of the budget.
I like responsibility and pinpointing responsibility, and that's why I'm saying it still should remain with Castle. I mean, at least we can go to them. I mean, Mark might not be there forever, and then you say there's a backup process. Those backup process is retired people like myself at 79 years old, and I'm not going to be around here forever either, and so, we have a contract service that's going to be there forever as long as we continue to pay them, I guess, and as long as we continue to hire them. So I like pinpoint.
And respectfully.
I'm sorry, I have to excuse myself. I have another meeting at 10:30.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, we take up a lot of time on this, and I absolutely agree with you. What we really talk about here is whether moving the money from O&M to O2.
Right.
Okay, essentially. And delineating the landscape portion of it line by line, great idea, gives a better idea of how we're spending the money and how we're doing the budget. The real question is whether or not the landscape working group, or frankly, any of the groups, giving new direction we're waiting from Tony in writing and that we got during his presentation, have the authority to oversee the work of a vendor. I asked that question directly at our last meeting. Tony's direct answer was a simple word: no. The fact that we have staff to do that in terms of Castle gets us out of some of the sunshine law issues. So I think we need to keep that in mind. Bob and I will forever disagree on how we should do this, and that's fine. We'll still be friends, sort of. But from the budget point of view, I think you're absolutely right. Go with one that has all the money in it, and move it over to the district staff to write a check. Isn't that wonderful? That means that Castle doesn't have to do that, but leave the administrative process pretty much in place with the advisory committee doing the things that Tony says you should do, which makes the decisions and make the recommendations, of letting staff, whether it's district or castle, do the administrative work.
Yeah, and I
Mr. Chairman?
with that, because we have staff here to do exactly what Scott does. Staff has been paying pond bills for years. And to your point, Alan, I mean, maybe what I think I'm hearing is you would think that ponds should go to them too.
Should what?
That we ought to move ponds over to.
No.
Well,
absolutely not.
I don't know why not, because the same dangers occur with succession and progression. Ponds has functioned effectively 15 years. There's no reason to think that landscape wouldn't just as effectively, and safety and security. So if the objection is that only Castle can do it, then maybe Castle should do everything. And I'm not saying facetiously.
Well,
Well, wait a minute, this is my opinion. It's my opinion. If the philosophy of PPAC is that everything should be handled by a third party, and that third party shouldn't be the district that we're already paying for, but should be somebody else, then that's probably the way you should go.
if for instance, Doug decided he wanted to
Whatever, move.
quit, move to Ukraine. Yep. And I'm sorry, I'm not speaking. If Doug doesn't happen to be there and somebody wants to step up, but doesn't really want all that extra responsibility, then what do you do with it? Then you are going to have to ship it someplace.
At that point in time, yes, but
Yeah.
right now, there's somebody to replace him today if he steps
Right,
in.
I got two in line.
So the resident volunteers are extremely strong within Pelican. And there's no reason to think it wouldn't be the same for the landscape worker. But
May I suggest that from a budgetary point of view, we can make the decision to move these accounts and come up with a number for the budget.
Okay.
We still need to make the determination of exactly how the administration is going to work.
Right.
Correct.
And I would like to do that at our next meeting after we have had the opportunity to hear from Tony. And what we are going to need to do to protect ourselves from any sunshine law violations. So I'd like to settle on the budget number and determine how the administration part of it is going to go forward at the next meeting.
Can I bring up one thing first, Bill?
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time this last week or in between this week looking at these different memorandums of understanding and the original O&M agreement. And the one thing that really stands out to me in the way these are written is responsibilities and understandings. And the one part here that I think is really important to note is the very last one. And it says, investigate all landscape easements and property ownership to ensure that such easements and ownership conform to the historic understanding of GSCDD service areas and its use in its best efforts along with GSCDD to bring such easements and ownership rights into confirmation with those historic understandings. We had been given an example of a current overview and ownership that demonstrated that the golf course was the owner of the strip of land that we had to replace these Washington palms. And if it's our responsibility to guarantee this, I think that's an overreach because we can't. We don't have the people to guarantee that what ownership is. And yet it's our responsibility to make sure that we don't pay for anything that is not GSCDD property. So I don't care where the money goes or where it comes from, but I think that there clearly needs to be an understanding about whose responsibility. And I think this leaves us vulnerable.
Well, I'd suggest to you, Randy, that is a separate project that.
Are we getting a help?
Yes,
Shouldn't that
where
be
we are
decided
gonna
before we
get-
talk about a budget?
Where we are going to be getting help from the staff, the CDD staff, to try and determine what those pieces of property, who they belong to, and whether we have, what kind of rights we have. So I don't know that we need to settle that today, because we're not talking about big numbers. We're talking about movements that have to be made, but I don't think they're going to be extreme. I think everybody agrees that we're talking about little pieces of property that we're going to have to determine who's in charge.
Phil, you pretty much made a recommendation to do the movement of the line items. You didn't call the recommendation, but and then leave the management of it as a later discussion.
That's right.
Can we just vote on that and move on?
Yes, I think we should. So
You want me to make a recommendation?
make a recommendation as far as.
I recommend that the line items, like Phil mentions, the line items for the budget move from Castle to CDD financial system, and then we make the determination of the management of that at a later date.
We also want to include in that which budget we are recommending here.
The line items that were listed from on that one sheet.
It's either one or two.
Well, the one from Laura. Didn't Laura have the detail on that?
Yeah.
Or maybe it was your report.
I think
it was this one. Bob's. But I would exclude 706571, which is the O&M agreement. I would exclude that from the discussion now. I'm just talking about moving the CDD landscape thing that are currently line items that are currently under Castle system over to the CDD system.
Mm-hmm.
Laura presented a different.
Okay, excuse me. So Doug, are you talking about approving version 2 that adds back in the amount of money so that that one line item is 93,000 and some odd dollars?
Yes.
Is that your motion?
Yes.
Version 2, but adding in the amount that makes that one line item 93,000 and some odd dollars.
Right.
Yep.
That's my motion, and that we did not make a determination as whether or not it's Mark or Scott that does the management of that.
Yeah,
That's my recommendation.
Okay. Do we have a second to that?
I'll second that.
You'll second it.
Mm-hmm.
So we will be able to correct that, Scott, the budget.
Yes.
So we need to vote on that now.
Yeah. Okay, I'll take individual votes. John, where do you come out?
I'd like to hear Mark's comments regarding this.
Him both first then.
Well, my comments are, I'm willing to accept the changes that have been made to move those items over, and then we'll discuss the areas of responsibility at a later time.
Okay.
Why do we keep postponing this at a later time, Phil?
Because we want to hear from Tony. And we are having a meeting with Tony on Monday to try and get an idea, because we are still fighting the sunshine laws. When I say fighting, we're still trying to figure out how we run things with regard to the sunshine laws, and we're not entirely clear on that. That's the reason.
I thought Tony gave his version of it.
But we need to determine some of the details of how that is done. Carol, where do you come out on this?
I vote aye.
Randy?
What are you asking, Phil?
I'm asking on Doug's motion, where you vote, where do you come out?
I vote yes.
Yes.
Mark?
Aye.
Okay. Alan?
I don't have a problem with it being moved over necessarily, but it does concern me about
decision points. And so I think we're moving this without that answer, but it makes my job just a little bit easier. So I guess I should say yes.
John and
Yeah.
John vote.
John, are you voting?
Yeah, I'll vote yes, but I have a concern of the way this is done. I mean, I vote yes, but I think we have at one time voted months ago, and it keeps coming up and up again.
Right, because we have encountered, since we voted on that, the sunshine law problems that we've got to deal with. We've got to address, John. And that's the reason it's.
We
come
have
up.
dealt with the sunshine laws for years.
No, we have not. We've dealt with them incorrectly for years. We have not.
And had no problem.
We have been violating the sunshine laws for a long time. And even Tony, I think, acknowledges that. And we need to correct that in the way we administer this contract.
There are two versions. Phil, I'm concerned that never mind. I vote yes, with the way this is put together, I'm not happy.
It carries 7-0. So that's the budget we will use. Scott, you'll get the corrected version of that to Laura. Okay, and we do need to deal with what John is concerned about, and we all are concerned about, is administratively how this is all going to be done. But it's not, John, I would submit to you that it's not a trivial project. Okay, I'm going to move on. Landscape renovation plan. Scott, I think it's your opportunity to come up.
Good morning. Scott Charnock, Pelican Preserve Property Manager. Couple of things as we go in and talk about these landscape plans to put a little ease in the concerns about property lines, easements. When our original contracts were set up and structured with Ameriscape, and when they were renegotiated this past year with Ameriscape, we used boundary lines that are now different on LIPA. So when the golf course was sold by Lennar, they resurveyed the land and changed the actual plats of the community. So you do have to remember that we have to go back and investigate that. The district's commitment is, and their position is, if we've always funded those areas to maintain them, we're going to maintain them because we budget accordingly for them. So we're working on the back end to correct those errors that were done in the survey. Now, Tony Pierce is involved with it, Lennar's involved with it, and I got a note from Laura yesterday that Tetra Tech's involved with it. And she mentioned the only involvement she's aware of is that they have an intern working in tandem with another district staff member to identify where the easements are actually located, because we cannot rely on LIPA. LIPA is the Lee County Property Appraiser's website, and if you go on that website, they don't update it on a regular basis. They do on large transactions, but you can't rely on them. You have to go in and check the documents with the county. So that's why the contracts are written the way they are, why the maps that support the contracts are written that way. So just so you know, that's what's going on. I hope that helps, Randy.
The reason I bring this up, I had an next door neighbor who did significant work on his lawn, even to the point of having a city of Fort Myers individual come out to try to find his property stakes. They could not find him. That individual from the city said Fort Myers, or I should say Pelican Preserve, is known to be the worst surveyed community in the city of Fort Myers.
I believe that.
This is what this is what the city employee said. So that's where my concern comes, is that,
Yeah,
you know,
we are aware of that.
Yeah.
And I think anyone who's been involved with Pelican for any length of time, like Bob Gephardt's fully aware of it, Phil is, I am, that's what has to be worked through. And you can place blame, but that doesn't really matter.
I
That
just
was
don't want
years
us
ago.
as a group to get
Yeah.
crossways.
Well, and again,
CBD.
it's up to all of us as the leadership and management groups to work through these little landmines that we have that were bestowed onto us.
Yeah.
It's our problem to solve.
Right.
So
Got it.
that's not going to go away.
Yeah.
And it is,
And that
many individuals are working on it.
that project is on our list.
Last meeting, last Thursday, I presented to you an overview of the landscape renovation plan. I've worked with Mark on this plan, and I just wanted to give you the summary of what we are asking PPAC to consider to move this project forward in several different phases. But keep in mind, the landscape plan is projects and cost projections as they are today. We do realize that as we go further down the road, there's going to be cost differences in plant material. And we also realize that plant materials may not be used in certain areas because of shade or areas that plant material will not survive for whatever reason. What we request is that PPAC approves the funding and to use a portion of the non-assigned reserves for the landscape renovation going forward. We would like to add an additional $350,000 in funding for landscape renovation, and this is throughout all the Pelican Preserve Commons, including the shared areas up by the commercial properties, throughout the community, and all the commons that are owned by the CDD. Last year, PPAC did approve $150,000 to be utilized for Prado Drive and the islands in the cul-de-sacs around Prado and Casella. Matter of fact, Mark brought up the plans last week on the design of those islands, and that's where some of that funding is going to be used. The landscape, LWG, the work group will still continue to put together the design plans for all of Pelican. As they put together the design plans, we will put the plans out to bid. Doug, you may want to help me with this, but I had a quick question I don't want to forget to ask you. When you were dealing with purchase orders from the district, is there a set amount that requires a purchase order to be submitted, or is it any amount?
It's any amount.
Any amount?
They will not pay an invoice without a purchase order. The district will not pay an invoice without a purchase order ready there.
So, and in your experience, how's the turnaround time for purchase orders?
With Laura, a day.
Okay.
The biggest problem is getting the vendor to submit it to the district. Once the vendor submits it to the district, Laura turns them a PO number around the same day.
Okay.
As long as you have budget.
All right.
And so Scott, with all the vendors that you're accustomed to dealing with, they would have their W-9 forms and
That's,
liability insurance certificates and things in.
We're
in
talking,
place.
they've already been vetted.
Yes, and so that would be required by Laura.
Yeah, I just
So-
needed to know the dollar amount because sometimes we are talking about a $200 emergency call and
Right.
repair on a irrigation break. So actually, they're doing the repair before the
actually,
TO's been added.
what you might think about, and I'm sorry because it's taking a little time, you might want to think about doing a blanket PO for a certain amount of money up front, that then each individual invoice can go against that PO. So let's just say you did $5,000 for those small and issue a PO for $5,000.
Can I make a suggestion? I've been listening. I got out of my call early. If you guys are going to have Scott doing all this work, my recommendation is leave it where it is on the HOA line. Let the breakdown come from Castle and just keep doing it the way you're doing it. We do have the flexibility to make a change mid-year, understanding that based on the last board meeting, there's going to be some documentation coming with the way the board is delegating responsibilities to both PPAC and Stony Brook, and then how each of those committees delegate responsibilities to their work groups. I think this is getting extremely complicated. And until we have a good, clear process in place, I think you just leave everything as is. And we can make a change during the budget year. It's not a big deal. We can set up line items. We can move the funds around. Bottom line, the dollars don't change. It just depends on who's paying them. There really is no, I don't care either way. It doesn't make any difference to me either way. But I think this is getting extremely complicated and it's going to be a lot of extra work for Scott. And it sounds like it's going to actually be more work for us at the district than it is now with the way things are being done through the Ponds Group. So that would be my recommendation from a staff perspective, is to leave it as is until you guys can get this all ironed out and we can make a change later.
Yeah,
I missed the vote. I must have been in my call.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wish
So-
you had,
Yeah.
brought this forward earlier. I think we're ready to
Okay,
try and move things.
we're on our way down the road.
Yeah.
I'll have some fun.
Is there any way to?
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, I'm looking at a document that was passed out at the last meeting. It says Pelican Preserve Landscape Worksheet
Right.
with 3 highlighted areas: Pelican Preserve Boulevard, Cypress Grove Drive, monuments, and islands and cul-de-sacs.
That's
And the
correct.
total is $347,963.49. Is that what this is what you're talking about, right, Scott?
That is correct.
Okay. What we passed at the last meeting on Mark's motion, is any of that included in this amount? I think it was about 150,000.
It's actually was approved to move ahead with the cul-de-sacs, and there's 2 of them.
Okay,
The type of funding and where the funding was going to come from was not approved.
okay. So on the cul-de-sacs that's listed here, there are 5 of them.
Yes,
So
that is
you're
correct.
in this 347,000, blah, blah, blah. All of the cul-de-sacs. This
That
is
is
all you're talking about doing, right?
Currently, yes.
Okay, and that would include what Mark presented last time,
The designs, yes.
the 2 designs.
Yeah.
So basically what we're looking at is a motion to approve the Pelican Preserve Landscape Worksheet.
That's correct, as part of the master plan for the renovation.
Okay, and I didn't see it in here, but are the 2 monuments at Tree Line and Colonial included in here at all?
There is some work, but it's not a complete renovation because those areas are still in discussion. The monuments that are listed within the landscape worksheet are the neighborhood monuments.
Right. That's what I saw in here. I just wanted to make sure that those two monuments at that intersection were not included in this.
Well, we are going to be doing some work as far as shaping up the plant material and removing all the dead plant material, but we have not decided on what direction to go with those as of yet. That'll be
Okay.
done in 2023.
So this amount of money then, Mr. Chairman, this almost 350,000 would all be taken out of our reserves? Or is part of it from a line item and then part from reserves, or how does this work?
Go ahead, Scott.
It was funded through the reserves.
Yeah, so we will take it out of our undesignated reserves.
And obviously, based on the financial report, we have plenty there.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I was going to say, I'd like Mark.
has Mark made a motion?
Well, we're not there yet.
Oh, we're not there yet. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, if I just want to make a clarification, what Scott has put together that you all have is just a number that we can budget off of. We are not going to do exactly what all these proposals are. He asked Ameriscape to give proposals for all these different areas, which they did do for budget purposes. However, we still need to go through those, and this was Ameriscape's interpretation. This isn't necessarily what we're going to put in, but for budget purposes, this gives us something to work off of.
And for the purpose of designating monies out of the reserve.
That's correct.
That's right.
So you're saying it could cost more or less?
It should cost less based on what I've seen, what Ameriscape proposed.
So it's sort of like a not to exceed number.
Correct.
Okay, and you probably noticed on the sheet that when we went through the financials that I already got the June numbers for the unassigned reserves, and they've gone down to 1,051,000. So it's not the 1,250,000 we have in there right now. And I might ask the question, how do you then replenish the unassigned reserves? Is that savings of the budget, the previous budget year that goes into there? Is that how you replenish it?
Actually, it never comes out of unassigned reserves until the funds are pulled to make the payment on the invoices. Then they'll slide up into the operating account in the 002, like the boardwalk.
Yeah.
And then it would be paid through that account.
How do they go in? I think is what he's asking. How
Oh,
does it get into it?
Oh, how do they,
How do you
the-
replenish? How do you
Yeah.
replenish the unassigned?
well, you're not going to pull the entire amount out.
No, I
But
understand.
we need to be, we need to be planning on how we accumulate.
Oh, how you're going to replenish it in the future.
Yes.
That's done through your operating budget and
So your
reserve
savings on the
funding.
Annual budget.
Your savings on
Yes.
your annual budget. And in the case of the capital reserves, we actually designate a specific
certain
amount.
percent, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, on the ponds reserves, the only way money gets in there is carryover from the prior year. When we spend it, they do the audit. And the carryover always goes into ponds reserves. Then you have to move it from there to an individual line item. But that's the only way ponds reserves, it comes from carryover from prior year not spent.
All right. Well, I'm just going to point out that the unassigned reserve right now has gone down, or will go down at the end of June. So that's just for your information.
Well, and again, when you're dealing with reserves, you can't spend reserve money that you don't have. So it will have to be replenished.
And we
So,
have,
and on the other item, the projected assessments on the bond, if you do decide to go that way with reserves, you're going to have to replenish the reserves at a quicker rate than the bond, because much of our infrastructure is going to need attention within the next 5 years. So, okay. Any questions for me? Oh, wait.
We've
Oh.
got to, yeah, let Bill make, why don't you stay there, Scott, and let's Bill make his
I think
comment.
what the Community Association has asked Scott to present, along with Mark, is a way to earmark a portion of the undesignated reserves as a newly created landscape reserve. Because I think Alan's point is very well taken. The reserves vary up and down every month based on your surplus or deficit. And if you don't earmark this stuff and set it aside, you run the risk of depleting untowardly, without plan, the undesignated reserves. So I think Scott may have misspoke a little bit. He did. Thank you. We don't want to spend the money now, but we certainly want to take that 300 some odd $1,000 and set it aside in a new designated reserve for landscaping, assigned reserve, which we haven't had in the past, and we've been justly, I think, criticized for not doing.
Yes.
Good idea.
And one more question, Scott, please.
Thank you, Bill, for.
Scott, one more question.
Yes.
This is for now, okay, or what you want to plan to do now. Has there been anything put together about like a 5-year plan so that we can budget easier for the next 5 years, rather than piecemeal it?
I'll send it over to you. I did do a draft of one that I presented to PPAC several months ago.
Okay.
Mark,
This is
any
a
comments
2-year?
on that?
Is this a 2-year plan, this one? Or what?
What we have here, maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but I truly believe we can get through this in a year. If everybody's willing to progress, this isn't rocket science. If you take a walk down the street, you can identify dead and dying plants. The only changes come when you want to replace some of them, which we are not going to replace a lot of them because they won't be missed. So it's my hope that every month I come to you with another chunk for your approval. And hopefully it's far less than what Ameriscape has given proposals for, because Ameriscape, I'm not faulting them, they typically, if they pull out a plant, they're going to put in another plant, whether or not you need one or not. So we'll eliminate that going forward. So.
Okay.
Yeah, my only concern was, it's not really a concern. It'd be nice to know that every year is going to have so much more money that we're going to need for, and so we can budget for it much easier.
And I understand that.
Our budgeting process has left something to be desired up at this point. And I think we need to improve that. So, Scott,
I have nothing else except.
Well, I think we will need a motion.
Yes.
To assign this $350,000 to landscape reserves. Do I?
I'll make a motion that we assign 350,000 to landscape reserve, but to earmark it to make sure it's for that out of the undesignated money.
Yes. Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any
And that's a not to exceed figure, correct?
Yeah. Well,
300,000 not to exceed.
yeah, we're not talking about spending the money. We're talking about
Moving it.
moving the
Moving
money.
it, yes,
350,000 is 350,000.
yes.
Okay. Any further discussion, questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion passes, so not. Okay. Ready to move on.
You'll be happy to know that's also my manager's report.
Okay. I would like to skip, I say skip, just very quickly go from number 7 to number 9, the capital reserve study. We had been trying for some time to get get a vendor and do a new capital reserve study. We need to move that forward. The problem I think we're going to encounter is that the companies that do those kinds of studies are not very available these days. So we've got to start looking for something. And we need somebody to take the lead on this. And John, I mentioned to you about taking the lead on starting the work on the capital reserve study. Are you willing to do that?
I have two questions. One, if we can't find, you're saying for me to first try to find somebody to do this, but the people aren't available right now, is what you're saying.
Well,
So help me out.
that has to be determined as to whether they are or are not available. But the first thing is to, is to see, is to find out if there are any available. And as Bob has just suggested, I think the district staff can assist on that.
I'm willing to take this on, but I'd rather do it when I'm down in Florida. I cannot do it while I'm up here.
So you can't even take on working with the staff here to try and find a vendor?
I think it would be easier when I'm down there because I can go to Gateway or do different things to talk to people. It's a little difficult doing it from up here. I mean, if you're willing to wait till I get back down there at the end of September, that's fine.
Yeah.
Scott Sharnoff, Pelican Preserve. John, would you like me to do some preliminary work? I do know of companies that do reserve studies for associations.
All right, that's fine. Yeah, and then I can work with you or give me a buzz.
Yep.
I mean, we're not violating any sunshine laws if you and I talk prior to meetings. That could work well.
What I'm looking for, John, is somebody to take the lead on this.
All right, I'll do that, working with Scott, let him come back to me and then we can discuss stuff. I'm not a financial guy, I'm an engineer, so it's up to you guys.
Okay.
I have one question. So sorry, I came in before. I didn't hear the whole vote. I just want to confirm that that you voted to adopt or accept version 2 that I gave you, the one with the 2 on it, and then that I need to adjust the administrative fees back to the full $93,000 and we're good.
Right.
Okay, that was what I needed. Thank you.
That's correct. Okay. Boardwalk access rules. We are in a position where we should at some point be suggesting to the SCDD board what permanent boardwalk access rules should be. Right now, we've been dealing with temporary rules, and they haven't been terribly clear. I've been unable to get Tony to allow us to put very positive ones into place. So I guess my question would be to the committee, what are your thoughts on this? I provided you with what some of the rules are, some of the considerations might be, and I would, my sense is that so far we're doing okay. I haven't heard a lot of complaints, but I would be interested in how people are feeling. This is another consideration. So can I have are there any comments on this? Have any of you thought about it? As to what we should be proposing?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I have heard no one complain about the way it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
There were some initial, initial complaints, but it's pretty much died down.
Right?
It's a sleeping dog right now. I agree.
Is it something we think we shouldn't put our hands on at this point? Just let it go?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bob Gephardt from Monticello again. the choices that we had in the past were to engage an engineering firm to study the environmental impact. And it would have been a cost for that. We had the money in the bond fund, so it wouldn't have cost us anything. But as everyone else has said, this thing is just kind of, everyone's getting used to it and it's dead. I have had a number of people approach me. And that's why I just passed that document out. And Phil and I have discussed this in a very general sense because it looked like a reasonable idea. But it doesn't address this where the boardwalk access, if we go to South Florida Water Management, that's going to be a very expensive process. The proposal we have in front of us is something that we could just do and see if we get objections to it. This wouldn't really cost anything, but it would be a way to allow our residents that have limited access to at least get into the central area. And then hopefully we have these airport
You want to
chairs.
describe this since you just.
Yeah. Okay, this is not my idea, but I thought it was a decent idea. A resident proposed to me the idea of allowing limited golf cart access to the center gathering area. Entrance would be limited from the Sienna entrance point only by removing the single bollard. Keep the dual bollards at the Brokey Center entrance. The purpose would be to restrict the total volume of carts going into the preserve area, since residents would no longer use this to gain access to the town center from the Sienna side. Used to be people would cut across it. But allowing the carts to go to the gathering area would increase accessibility for those residents with mobility and or vision issues. In the gathering area, we would have to go out and purchase or position 4 airport-style handicap wheelchairs, the type of chair that requires someone to push the individuals wishing to gain entry to the wildlife viewing zone down the long, narrow path. No carts would be allowed down the path to the viewing area. The wheelchairs would be positioned in the area previously occupied by the raised observation deck in the gathering. Yeah, that might be worth consideration. We'd still have the intent, we'd be conforming to the intent of limited access and not disturbing vegetation. But this would also be an accommodation for our residents that have mobility issues. And one other thing this might satisfy if we did this, if we voted to do this, is we would not have to provide golf cart parking in the conservation area or on the path leading to it.
Is it possible for somebody to move the computer screen down so that we can read what the golf cart
Oh, yeah.
part of this document says?
Well, you do have that. It's been sent to you twice, but okay, yep. Here are the considerations.
So this would not violate the permit that we have?
It would.
It would. I think, yeah.
It would.
It would. We would have to go to South Florida Water Management District.
I mean, it would, right, Bob? This would violate the.
I would. I just do it. See if anybody.
Yeah, but I mean, we ain't saying would we do it. We just said it would violate the permit we currently have.
We've been in violation 20 years.
Yeah, I know that. I know that. Yeah.
Comment.
Ed Hedges, Azora. I was at the one meeting we were talking about this, and I didn't even know where the boardwalk was that you'd spent $1 million on, because I couldn't find it on any maps. There were no, and I'm new here. So I had to ask one of our neighbors where it is. They took me down there. But I did some Googling, and there's some Department of Transportation regulation or requirement around mobility scooters that they can't be more than 30 inches wide. I think that's to make, doorways and other things and that. So on the scooters, there is a requirement or a size limitation, and it probably gets through those bollards. I didn't take a tape measure out, but you can probably get through the bollards.
Yes.
Okay. And I would think, yeah, you got to park your golf cart, but I don't think it would be safe to have golf carts going down that boardwalk, with people walking and other things. And if somebody has to turn around to get back up and try to back down with them. So I don't know. It's just, I hadn't heard anybody mention this, the size requirement or limitation for the scooters. That might be a consideration on your requirements.
Thank you, Ed. Right now, effectively, the rule we have is no golf carts Are people using bicycles on the boardwalk? So okay, so
They're going to because they can fit it.
right. So effectively, the rule we have now is no golf carts, but bicycles are allowed. And I think that, you know, there are these requirements for wheelchairs to be used, and I'm assuming that people probably must be using them. Manually powered mobility aids, and I think we would have no problem with those. And then other power-driven mobility devices. I'm not sure, you know, we could allow that. I'm not sure that's a big deal. We need to allow people with disabilities to use those. I don't think we want to get into proving that there are can be demonstrated that the devices cannot be operated in accordance with legitimate safety requirements. I don't think we can demonstrate that. So,
Phil, if I might, from the meetings with South Florida doesn't really care about ADA. They stated that.
Yeah.
Their rules are their rules.
Well,
ADA is a totally different thing. So, because when Tony investigated ADA, surprisingly enough, a golf cart can be considered ADA. It's in there. So we don't want to get into that mud pit.
no,
You know, that's,
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
but, you know, we are saying to ourselves, it should be pedestrian only. It's just kind of leave it vague like that. Obviously, people with wheelchairs can get in there. I don't think there's going to be a problem with that.
Actually, I think where we're at right now, if you can fit within the bollards, you can get in. I mean, that's about what it is.
All the east side of this.
Right. It's a sleeping dog.
Should we leave it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do we just leave it?
Yeah.
Okay. I have no problem with that. What do others think?
I think leave it alone.
Okay. I'll talk to Tony about this to see whether there's any other requirements we need to meet, but he hasn't bugged me about that either, so.
Do you want to consider limited access as described in the proposal?
I think we're best off leaving the sleeping dog lie. People seem to be getting along okay, and interestingly enough, you know, before we did this, there were people who said to me, you know, if I'm not allowed to use that boardwalk, you know, I'm going to slit my throat, kind of comments. And obviously, they somehow managed everything. And
We've adapted.
yep, we've adapted. Okay, let's move on. Gatehouse backup generator. Randy, that's your baby.
Yes, and we bring that up on the screen for those who don't have a copy. It's on the computer. Yeah, is it possible? What we'll be looking at is a quotation from West Coast Electrical and Lighting Services for backup generator at the Gatehouse under safety and security initiative. So in the past, we have not had any backup power there. And there have been a number of times when power has come in and out intermittently. Now, 2 weeks ago, we had power down again. In this case, it wouldn't have effectively handled it because we had a lot of burned out components in our system, which is something that for discussion in the future. But this is the proposal that a quote that we got to have an 18,000 watt air-cooled Generac generator for immediate backup power anytime there is an interruption in power. It would be connected to a fuel supply, the natural gas that is currently in place in the area of the Gatehouse and some of the earliest neighborhoods in Pelican Preserve. The quotes what we have are based on different lead times, so the suggestion would be to approve the quoted price that we have here, and then perhaps put an additional not to exceed $5,000 to accommodate what the cost would be for the gas company to make the adjustments. This is in large part to supplement the volunteer effort for a Pelican Preserve emergency response team. In the event that we had another hurricane, that security team can be off site for a couple of days, I believe. And we have a number of volunteers in place who would man the front gates and other types of communities. But they would need to have some power to operate the gates and the computer systems and things of that nature.
And the PPERT supports this?
Yes, original request had come from PPERT to investigate.
It is part of,
I'm the board liaison to PPERT, and yes, we absolutely do support it.
Okay, thanks, Bill.
is this within the 20K, let's just say 20K, is that within the current budget for current year?
It should be under the O&M arrangement. There should be adequate.
So the money's in the budget.
The money is in the budget.
Spend, it's just what you spend it on, and
yes,
I got you.
And let me just say that I also had done a lot of looking at what it would be to put in a portable generator, but that requires a pretty heavy piece of equipment that needs to be stored somewhere. Perhaps would have to have a trailer to transport it back and forth. And then you have to have people to do that. And we don't really have any employees for CDD that it could accomplish all that. So, so it appears that the most practical way to do this is to have this more expensive but backup generator that we can count on for, years to come.
Any questions of Randy?
You might have to have backup sources of propane and or diesel fuel and all that. And then you got to make sure it's fresh.
Yeah.
Randy and I talked about this a lot. Natural gas is the only way to go. It really
Natural
is.
gas is what we're going to
It's
do.
Natural gas
It's
the only
worth
way.
the extra expense to do that.
And I don't know if you got a cost yet for the 5,000 to run the line. That seems a little bit on the low side.
Scott, have you ever gotten a response back from the gas company about a quote or?
That ain't cheap.
They're too busy to get back with me right now.
That ain't cheap, I'll just tell you that. 5,000 is an optimistic number.
Is it? So I don't know. Well, I'm not sure what to do with that, but the idea was that we're still coming into the most serious hurricane, part of the hurricane season. And we also have some budget that should be.
But it's the day if you lost power in a hurricane or something like that, is there a way to put the gate up to just keep it up, during? Oh, the bolts on the thing.
Taken apart, and then you have no control to the.
Right. Just the person.
Right. And you have nothing to, no computer power.
Yeah.
No lights, no air conditioning.
Yeah.
Randy, may I suggest that you may want to make a motion for a not to exceed $25,000 to install this. That would leave 10.
For power, for the.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Alan.
How many bids were on this? Do you know? Did you only get one bid on this?
We got one written bid. There's another company that is approximately the same pricing, but they have not submitted. Key is we're using the district's, the electrician that we have on site, handling all the district electrical requirements. The district has a budget already presented.
I guess my question is that a process or a policy that you get more than one bid? Or can you just go with one bid?
That goes to 100,000. Yeah. Under 100,000.
Yeah, okay. Okay. And then there's got to be another expense, if I read this right, to take out a tree in order to place this thing?
There's a small tree as you leave the Gatehouse, where you leave the community. On the left where that bulldoze is, there's a small tree.
Okay,
That's significant.
all right.
Yeah, so there are three of those trees, and Mark would know what they are, but they have a diameter of maybe 4 or 5 inches,
Yeah,
and they're
okay.
7 or 8 feet tall. There's 3 of them there, and there needs to be place taken out so that a base could be put in for that generator.
And then is this going to be visible when you drive in?
Well, not very much.
When you drive in, when you drive out, you can see it, but not on the entry.
This, if you're observant as you go through around the town center and that, you'll see these Generac generators in quite a few locations.
Yeah.
And many homes have started to put them in as well, and then put in a propane tank. So what we're talking about here is it's a tie into the natural gas line that comes into Pelican.
Yeah, I'm not opposed. I mean, I think it's a good idea. It's just that I think we got to understand how much money is going to be spent.
Scott, what would it be? Could we get additional bids from?
It's going to take some time.
Yeah.
Everybody's busy, or they don't have the staff to send somebody out to give them estimates. So I can always drive to the vendors and see if I can get a estimate.
But you're saying it's a district policy that anything under 100,000, you can go with one bid? That's a district policy.
Manager doesn't have to go out for bids.
Okay. All right.
Dollar
All right, thank you.
thresholds for almost everything.
Thank you.
I assume concrete barrier posts will be part of this when it's finished.
Probably just a concrete slab.
No, I'm talking about barrier posts to keep the cars from taking it out. No, I mean, you laugh, but
I'm sorry.
Well, no, because you know what happens with the gate.
I'm just saying that
Yeah.
should be included in there somewhere.
Well, have we ever had anybody run into the back of the Gatehouse? I think that'd be a first, but
Not that side, coming in, yes. Well, but they have to hit the gate.
No, it's a good.
Kathleen, come up to the,
Kathleen Anderson, president of Avila Circle. So I've had to get involved in the updating of the city code on generators. Just so you know, the codes have changed in the last 7 years on it. Currently have a call from the city saying that somebody moved a generator and they replaced a broke one and they didn't move it according to the current city code. So I'm trying to get that rectified. But the city code in relation to windows, doors is there, and they do come out and inspect, I'm finding out. I just wanted to update you guys on that. That has changed since a lot of the generators went.
thanks, Kevin. Any further discussion? You want to make a motion on this, Randy?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the proposal from West Coast Lighting and Electrical not to exceed $25,000 for the installation and the fuel hookup to our natural.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes 7-0. Okay. Scott, do you have any further report?
No.
You do not.
We'll keep it rolling.
Okay. Randy, do you have any further
No.
from safety and security? Okay. Doug?
I along with the original report I did for the last meeting, I'll bring up a few things. I have a document, a 12-page document of how the ponds group operates to review with Tony to make sure we're following all the guidelines. It's pretty well ready to go to Tony from a sunshine law standpoint. So everything's how a purchase order is done, how you pay an invoice all the way through, how bids are done, all that type of stuff that will be a part of that document. It's about 12 pages right now with drawings that I have done. So I wanted to bring that up. Another thing we're looking at that was not in the report is power for our aeration around the community. It's costing us from FP&L bill is around $80K a year. And I'm looking at ways to reduce that. I'm having working with the district vendors come back with ideas of how to reduce that, because $80K is 2/3 of my aeration budget. That one line item, 2/3 of it goes to power. So we're looking at ways around that to reduce aeration, maybe put timers on there and things. But I just want you to know that that's something we're looking at because of the $80K expense. And the other thing is talking about how things are working between all the work groups with Scott and Mark and our work group, the shade on the compressors. They worked through that, issued a proposal through the district. It was about $9K that was offset by reductions in maintenance. And it just worked perfect between the three individuals working together. Everything's working. It's just that we have to get around some of the other things. But as far as the groups working together, I don't think it could be any better.
Mark, it would seem to me that you could use some of what Doug has put together as far as the charter, if you will.
That's the intention. It'd be for Mark or any other work group, if you put a work group in place, and it will have been blessed by Tony from a sunshine law standpoint, and there will be no question, of how you need to operate as a work group.
So Randy, also for safety and security at some point.
All right.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Any questions of Doug? Okay. CDD meeting attendance. We've already had the one on the 21st. I was there.
Is there any issue that will come up from our board at that CDD meeting, the second one?
The 8-4?
Yeah.
Trying to think. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. The rules and regs possibly.
If he's going to do that for work groups, if he's going to do that, I'll take that one.
You'll take that one? Okay. And the September ones. Anybody have, I don't have a calendar. You got one? First and the 15th. Thank you. Anyone take the first and the first meeting or the 15th? We have volunteers. Your enthusiasm overwhelms me.
You can dial up in.
Mr. Chairman, my husband, John, is going to be having hip surgery in September, hip replacement surgery. So I could, quote, attend via Zoom and report that way.
This would be on the 1st of September, Carol?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's a necessity for you to be physically present. Anybody for the 15th?
Okay, so I'll take the first then.
Okay. Do we have anybody who can do the 15th? Nobody has it available? I do not personally, so I can't take it.
Well, I could do it again on the 15th, but I would not be there personally to do it. I would do it over Zoom.
Okay. We'll put you down for both meetings, Carol, at this point.
Okay. That's fine.
Okay. All right. One other item. Chelsea O'Reilly, the district manager who spoke with us previously, has asked whether we want to submit weekly updates from PPAC to the board. It would be in the first board meeting of the month, and they would need a written report before the report is made. Just want to get a sense of the committee as to whether you think we want to participate in that.
But Chelsea's, there's a chance what is this message?
She said, our district manager, Chelsea, has asked if you wish to provide a board of supervisors a monthly report.
What kind of report are they talking about?
Well, I think just a report of the activities of the group, you know,
Yeah,
the major
Since
things.
Chelsea's come on board, she's trying to put a lot more discipline into the meetings. And so there are certain meetings of each month where certain things are discussed. So if you had a PPAC report, I mean, historically, we have the resident here and they speak, you know, member of the PPAC. But if you had something that you wanted to formally give them every month, then it would show up in either the first or the second.
It's the first.
It's the first meeting, okay. So there's a number of things that we go over, but it's just a courtesy type of thing.
Preparing the written report would take somebody's got to do the work.
I guess that means no, we don't want to do it.
I guess so. I'll work on that, Chelsea. Okay. All right, our next regular meeting is August 11th. Is there any?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, are we still on committee member requests?
Yes.
Okay, I would like to bring up a subject to the PPAC, and it has to do with the two monuments that are on either side of the intersection of Tree Line and Colonial on the southeast and the southwest corners that say Pelican Preserve, and I guess there's supposed to be fountains there and landscaping and all that sort of stuff. I can understand why they were put there in the beginning. That was the entrance to Pelican Preserve. And so if you're going to sell homes, of course, you put up signs and monuments and all that sort of stuff. So I understand why they're there. And up until the time that Lennar sold out, it was understandable why we maintained them and kept them and all that sort of stuff, because they were still selling homes, even though it's not really the entrance into Pelican Preserve. So I would like to suggest to the committee that we consider selling that property. It's not the entrance to Pelican Preserve. Even if you Google the entrance, that does not come up. I don't know what the commercial market is for real estate. I have no connection with it. I have no idea what kind of money you could get, but I really think we don't need that property any longer. And if we could get some money for it and put it into our coffers, all the better. So I think the process is that we as PPAC would have to recommend to the CDD that it be declared, what's the word?
Surplus?
Surplus, thank you. That it be declared surplus, and then they would take over doing everything. So honestly, I would like to hear some comments from my other PPAC members as to what they think or any ideas, or we could, I mean, if you want to think about it and put it off to another meeting, we could do that too.
Carol, I personally agree with you. And I would just mention that I also voiced that to Philip Rovner and got a very strong pushback on that. I'm not sure if Bill would like to address that, but Mr. Rovner suggested that there would be a significant fight over that with the community association. So. Go ahead.
Bill Strigo. I don't know the answer to that, and I really haven't had that discussion. I haven't really heard much from my other colleagues on the community association board. Philip tends to have strong views on a lot of things, and the board does follow his lead on a lot of things, but I'm not sure that we've discussed that. We don't have a particular position on it.
I think
Carol? Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's a good idea to investigate what you could get for it. And just to reduce, I looked at the budget just a second ago. It was 40K.
Is it 40? I was thinking
40K for
30,000.
next year's budget has 40K for colonial, those monuments, the replacing a fountain, things like that. And that doesn't even include the landscape. So, I mean, there's a certain amount of maintenance that we're going to pay for that, let alone what value you would get for selling.
Might I suggest, Carol, that you pursue this by starting with Philip Rovner if he has strong reasons to not want us to do that, and then you could report back to us.
Or Bill could.
I can bring it up.
I have a comment. I think if you took a vote of the community, they would not be in favor of eliminating that. I think it adds to Pelican Preserve. It's right off of Main Boulevard. I don't know. I'm not in favor of selling it. But I think it's a community vote that would be required.
Scott Charnock, Pelican Preserve Property Manager. I would suggest to get with Chelsea first to see if that can even be sold.
Legal.
And we don't even know legally if it can be sold, but I can tell you if you look at the property lines up there, there's really not enough room to put a commercial building.
Yeah, you can't do anything with that.
Yeah, so.
That's true. The one strip of land by Winn-Dixie is underwater half the year.
Yeah. So I would actually recommend starting with Chelsea to see if we can even legally do that.
Well, if there's, I was going to say, why don't you poll, Bill, if you would poll the association board, if there are, okay.
Okay.
Scott, would you or pursue with Chelsea? Have her pursue that. Okay. Anything else on that, Carol?
Nope. I just wanted to start a conversation about it.
Okay. There are other member or audience comments. Go ahead, Doug.
But Bob, I mean, I worry, something we talked about already in this meeting, the 14 to 33%. I worry about the fact if you lose on the 33%, you know what I'm talking about, the 33%, will they come back and say the 14% should be 33? All right, I mean, but the logic, I mean, it's the same logic. I worry about losing that battle. That's all I say. And we don't, you don't need another comment.
There are two unrelated things. The 33 is related to an assessment methodology.
I know.
That's completely different than the non-connectivity one. They're different. It's apples and oranges.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Is 14%, was that a negotiated thing here when? Many years ago, because when I did my analysis and I went through every line item and it came out to a little over 7% versus 14%. And so I don't know what they've included in there to come up with the 14%.
When you say your analysis.
Yeah. Yeah. If you look at the chart or the bar chart. CDD management allocations is 7.3%. The rest of it is for ponds, landscaping, security, capital set aside, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm not saying my number is exactly correct, but I don't think I'm off 7%. And so I don't know what they've included in that to get it up to the 14%.
Well, it's just the overhead piece.
Yeah, I think you're mixing
Yeah,
apples and oranges.
you're looking-
It's 7.3% of our total expenditures. I think your number is absolutely correct.
Yeah.
But it's 14% of the district's administrative
The
costs.
district has an administrative
Right.
cost, they're completely different, Alan.
Like
And it's
Laura,
14% of that.
all the
Okay,
resources.
all
Yeah,
right.
you could find
All right,
that in,
and I could show
I
you,
guess it's the
I could
old
show
budget.
you where that is.
Yeah. All right,
Okay.
all right.
All right.
Thank you. And I know you're going to get to the dates, but I won't be here next month. But I'll get you
Okay,
I'll get you the report ahead of that time if I get the financials sometime.
okay,
I'll send it to you.
all right.
And Mr. Chairman, I won't be there either. Next month, I will not be at the next meeting. We're out of the country and I can't even call in.
Yeah, I'll be in a cruise ship, so.
Okay, so I hope everybody else can make it, so we can have a,
I'm going to be out of town for August and September. I can come in virtually.
we start to get down to a problem because we can end up with not having a quorum. And the quorum requires physical, so if anybody else can't make it, we're in trouble. We may have to change the date of the meeting. So, are you good on the 15th?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you good on the 15th of or the 11th of, did we say the 11th? Yeah.
August, no, I'll be on a cruise ship.
No, not August, September.
September? Yeah, I think I'm good. September.
September 8th is the date. You're
Still
okay?
good. Yep. Yep.
Mark?
I think so.
You think you're okay, Doug? Okay. Okay, we look like to be okay.
I won't be there September 8th either. I'm going to be in Italy.
Okay. Well, so far,
I can zoom in on September 8th.
yeah, we need physical presence.
Oh,
Hopefully,
And what's the number? Physically 4?
4.
Okay.
4 of us need to be here, but it looks like the 4 of us can
Okay.
all make it.
Okay.
Okay. Any further committee member requests or audience comments?
Yes, Kathleen Anderson, president of Villa Circle Condominiums. I had a question and it's more about communication. I'm not a golfer, I'm not a member of the golf club, but I had phone calls from members in Avila concerning what I was then forwarded by a member of our community. They're called sprags, those great big giant looking bales of sod, hay, and it was at the end of over by the last house bordering Cypress there. Originally, there were stakes in from the survey all back in that area. I was told it was from by Joe, that it was from the golf survey, but there were sprags, there was a metal cage there, and I think it was grass sod for the golf course. But we had laid new sod in that area after we did a drain project, not all the way in. This goes back to talking about boundary lines in that area. Like, where are the boundary lines? I've spent 3 summers trying to get boundary lines from the city, and that, like somebody mentioned, that's a mess. But so the communication is, we don't know. You know, when stuff appears on what people view as a Villa property, they come to me, they ask me what's there. I drive down, look, I have no idea. And is there a better way to know? Because then I get 3 of the homeowners saying, well, the association paid for new sod on part of that. Was that our property or not? You know, we replaced what we knew was there from the drain project. But we didn't go so far because then Ameriscape told us that wasn't our property. Well, I have no way to prove or disprove that. And I'm just bringing this forward because if anybody has a way to resolve it, you know, I know even Scott and Chris, I've talked to them before and it gets confusing for us. But it also goes to a fiduciary responsibility toward a Villa Circle too. And the master and everyone else. Also not overpaying. You know, if we paid for something, that's fine, but then should the master then be going in or P-PAC and paying for that? I mean, it's like, you know, I don't want somebody double dipping. And I do feel a sense of fiduciary responsibility, even though I'm not the best at it. At times I try to be right about it. So that's just a concern I want to bring up, you know, and that even goes back to, you know, seeing over planning, all that. I agree with that. You know, there's areas, the islands in Avila, all of a sudden, a couple of years ago, somebody stuck, it was Ameriscape, plants in. The islands were fine with palms, all that, and we paid for that. I mean, it sounds like nickel and dime, and sometimes I do want a nickel and dime it, because then it adds to costs that whoever and whatever entity, Avila, condominium, P-PAC, CDD, master, somebody is paying for that, and sometimes I think it's double paid. Not citing anyone, you know, on our part, on whoever. So I'm talking really communication here on it, in concern to landscaping and concern to lines of boundary.
Would this be covered, Scott, do you think, with the survey we're going to be doing and looking at the pieces of property?
And do we need a survey? You know, Avila.
Come on, Scott. This is a Medusa head. Yeah. There are aspects of it that relate to the landscaping activity and having grants of easement, totally separate from what Kathleen is about. There are aspects related to the new survey of the golf course that was just taken. We are trying to get access to that. Heritage has agreed to give it to us, give it to Tetra Tech and to GIS Systems. We don't have it yet, but we expect to get it. And then once we have those things, it'll be a lot easier to sort through some of the stuff. There's ownership issues, there's easement issues.
Right.
It's a good point, and it's a mess.
Oh, yeah. And part of that will be straightened out once we get our hands on the survey.
Mm-hmm.
I know I spoke to the GM over at the golf club, and he had not received it from Heritage corporate office yet. So there's questions between neighborhood associations and the golf course. What we're going to be working on is just between the GSCDD and the neighborhood association. So actually, we're going to measure that, and of course the golf course, but it's going to take some time.
But that's,
Yes, you're going to have, the key is to maintain the maintenance while we work through this process. Yes.
I think, Bill Sirico, I think the critical question you're asking though is, can you determine the boundary lines? There's a lot of questions that need to be resolved in terms of easements and ownership. And that's what district staff and the engineering company will be working on. But if you go to the Lee County Property Appraiser's website, you can do the overhead look. And it will actually give you the boundary lines. You can see where the boundary lines are for your condominium association quite easily. Okay, so
It's on the GIS website.
yeah, you can get there. If you got a problem, give me a call. I'll come over with my laptop and show you how it works. And it's doesn't necessarily give you the information you'll find may not be comforting, but it's there.
It's,
Well, again, Kathleen Anderson, president of Villa Condominium. And the reason I'm saying condominium is because people are confusing with an HOA, which we are not. But thank you very much for that. And that is what I was trying to say. Again, you know, I have a thing where I'm going to reinforce this fiduciary thing, which concerns all of us. And I might not nickel and dime at times on my own projects, but for some reason I have this thing on. I hate over double paying for anyone. But going there with the money, I also want to ask if there's any further update on the Villa Road project. I know sometime, or should I go to CDD? Sometime in July, toward the end, I think.
Yeah, we have approved the request for doing the project and it will be moving forward.
Okay.
Last night.
It was approved on.
Oh, okay, I thought it was already approved
No,
prior.
it was approved.
I
it was-
thought-
It was approved by the,
Okay.
by us, but it was just approved by the board last
Okay.
time.
Are they still going to do what's called a boring?
Yes, I
Okay.
believe so.
Thank you.
Okay? Any other questions, comments to extend this out? Okay, well, we made it,
She just gave us the 5 minute.
we made it under 3 hours.
As a
I will,
continuation,
yeah.
5.5 hour meeting, 5.5 hour meeting.
And we didn't even resolve the tough issue.
No, we kicked them. We kicked the tough issues to
Yeah,
next meeting.
You know, I have a motion to,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
okay,
Second.
the meeting is adjourned.
Hey, Alan,
11:56.
if that